please come up onto the stage and join us here. मैं चाहती हूँ कि हमारे सभी मेहमानों के लिए बस जोरदार तालियों से उनका स्वागत करके एक भारतीय पद्धति के हिसाब से स्वागत करें, अपने हर्ष और उल्लास को जताकर। Of course, it is indeed a privilege that this session will be chaired by the Honorable Minister of Jal Shakti, Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji. We are deeply honored to have the august presence of the dignitaries on the dais, our guest speakers. हम स्वागत करते हैं माननीय जल शक्ति मंत्री श्री गजेंद्र सिंह शेखावत जी का। बहुत बहुत स्वागत है माननीय आपका। आज के सेशन को माननीय मंत्री महोदय ही चेयर करेंगे। The session will be chaired by the Honorable Minister of Jal Shakti, Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji. And as a token of our immense respect and to honor the esteemed dignitaries on the dais who are the guest speakers today, I would like to request Honorable Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji, Honorable Minister of Jal Shakti, to kindly present bouquets to the honorable guests on the dais. As a token of our immense respect and to honor our guest speakers, I request Honorable Minister to kindly present memento to all the guests. Honorable Deputy Minister of Kazakhstan, Mr. Shoaib Zoda Jamshed, and Honorable Deputy Minister of Tanzania, Engineer Mary Priska Winfred. And we have Dr. Asit Viswas, Distinguished Visiting Professor, University of Glasgow, United Kingdom, Dr. Mark Smith, Director General, IWMI, and Shri A.T. Mohile, former Chairman, CWC. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And as I told all of you that this session will be chaired by the Honorable Minister. So now, Honorable Minister, sir, I request you to kindly initiate the session, kindly give the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all who has come back after that break which was given. First of all, before I commence, I wish to express my gratitude and once again I welcome to all the international delegates who have come along for this 7th edition of India Water Week. So we have just completed the inaugural session where the President of India, Her Excellency Draupadi Murmu, she blessed her with her words. Now we are initiating the formal session where we are going to discuss about the different aspects of water in the next 4 or 5 days. In this particular session, I request all the dignitaries, since we are running late with the time, to keep in the time. And I request first Minister from Tanzania, Minister from Kazakhstan, Shalmazar Jamshed, to initiate and give his remarks. Thank you very much. Yeah, you can go there.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the floor. Excellencies, dear participants, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the government of India and the Ministry of Jal Shakti, and especially, to Honorable Minister, His Excellency Shri Gajendra Singh Shaukat, for the invitation to attend the India Water Week and opportunity to address you from this stage. I think it's very important that we are now in the seventh meeting of India Water Week, and it shows that it's very sustainable platform for discussion to the region and of course to the worldwide. Of the water security for Tajikistan for the whole world is one of the most important ones. Water is seen as a core of sustainable development, and without water, actually, the agencies, all agencies, will be very complicated and or even impossible. In case of Tajikistan, water plays also important role on ensuring the national security, since more than 95% of electricity in the country comes from the hydropower sector. That's why it was also important to look to some stations which are discussing especially regarding safety, regarding sustainability. And of course, our security future, our sustainable development in the future largely depends on how we value, manage, and use water resources. Dear conference participants, we live in a very rapidly changing world, which has been facing the new challenging and threats. In this context, my country also faced the challenges and will, without uh, action, have impact of our water security. First, climate change. During last 20, 30, 40 years, we lost, Tajikistan, we lost more than 1,000 micro and small glaciers. Just imagine, during just only 40 years, we are losing a lot of water resources. And of course, we might know that more than 80% of any impact of climate change through the water. It's a dry year or floods. That's why water and climate very related to each other. Second, population growth. Just only in Tajikistan in the last 30 years, we are increasing twice. I believe that in India and the whole world, just only if you remember last 40 years, 40, 50 years, the population of the earth were growing twice, from 4 million to 8 million right now. What is it? It means that demand will be increasing, but unfortunately, water resources will be never increasing. We can build some thermal power station, we can build some building for the housing, but we cannot build the new river. That's why it's very important to discuss in this Indian Water Week with all stakeholders, starting from the government to the last citizen, and of course, with attracting the private sector, scientifics, and everything to discuss how we can reduce the impacts of these challenges. Third, close relation of the water, energy, and food is the issues of the next nexus. And as I mentioned, 95% of electricity in my country comes from the hydro sector, and therefore any changes in the water sector will immediately impact the energy sector too. And more than 80% on agriculture production also depend on the, and of course, food production comes through irrigated areas. And we should also note it that 60% of our population living in rural area and very depend on the water resources, energy, and of course, agriculture. It means that in generally, water for me, for my country, it means that it's energy, and of course, it's agriculture. And one is very important is the uh, social issues. Fourth, infrastructure and investment. It's very important to have right infrastructure, and of course, we are dependent on the financial. In last COP26, I personally heard the Prime Minister Modi's speech regarding the commitments regarding the providing investment for climate change. And I fully agree with him because it's very important to have access to finance right now, not tomorrow, maybe yesterday, but not tomorrow. And of course, the last one, fifth one, we say in Tajikistan that with our colleagues in the World Bank that water management is a conflict management. That was very important to create some sustainable and of course very accessible tools for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, as a part of the world community, Tajikistan strives to make the world contribution and ensuring the water sector in different level. And by our initiative, 8 water-related UN General Assembly resolutions were adopted, including one of the Declaration of International Decade for Action Water for Sustainable Development. And for the midterm review of this decade, the UN Water Conference will be organized in the next March in New York. This will be the second ever United Nations Conference on Water, and the first almost 50 years after the conference organizing in Argentina in 1977. We, as a co-host of the conference, I mean the Tajikistan and the Netherlands, are striving to make the watershed moment of the world. The conference is a hope for many of us, but it's also our responsibility to use the correlate and make the historical not only term of time of definitions, but also term of these results. The preliminary terms of the interactive dialogue was already adopted, but the most critical part for this process is this result of the conference. How to achieve and make them impactful. For that to happen, a new initiatives are presented in the framework of the second Dushanbe Water Conference, namely Water Action Agenda is a set of voluntary commitments to accelerate actions toward achieving the goals. Just only in the morning session, I heard that is what was India doing in this in the water sector is amazing. 230 billion dollars to be spent during very short times. It also shows that I think it's also not just the commitment of the India, it's a commitment of this part of the world. In this regard, a great effort are being made to inform all interested parties, including UN member states, private sector, major groups, financial institutions, of this initiative and calls for such commitments to the preparatory process of the conference itself. Tajikistan and the Netherlands are making every effort to make the conference a truly watershed moment of the world. However, it will not be able to achieve success alone. We invite all of you to join us in this historical mission and help us to get the world back to track on achieve the water-related goals and targets by 2030, including through your transformative commitments, actions, and pledges. In the end, I want to one more time to provide this word of thank you to arranging this kind of meeting to organize, and I believe that what we're getting from these meetings will be also bring us to the New York to discussing the watershed movement for the next 10-15 years, and it's very important to be active. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir. Honorable Deputy Minister of Water, Tanzania, Engineer Mary Priska Benfred, kindly address us.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency, the guests of honor, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, invited guests, the Global Water family, ladies and gentlemen. This gives me pleasure and distinct honor to be one of the invitees in this life-giving event, the 7th India Water Week. First, I wish to extend my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the government of India for extending the invitation to the United Republic of Tanzania and good welcoming and hospitality according to my delegation. Dear guests of honor and colleagues, I bring you warm greetings and best wishes from the Excellence of Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of United Republic of Tanzania, and Honorable Juma Hamidu Aweso, Member of Parliament, Minister of Water. They wish you all of you success in remarkable celebration of the 7th India Water Week. Dear guests of honor and colleagues, the 7th India Water Week celebrations are taking place when the world is undertaking the midterm review of implementation of United Nations Resolution of Water, namely Water Decade for Action 2018-2028, Water for Sustainable Development. Therefore, the United Nations ambitions triggers the essence of these water celebrations in the great nation of India. Dear guests of honor and colleagues, the theme of 7th India Water Week, water security for sustainable development with equity, cannot be overemphasized. It has the nitty-gritty of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. United Nations Water Decades for Action Agenda, United Nations Human Rights for Water, Africa Water Visions 2025, and Africa Agenda 2063. Just to mention few, the theme manifests that water security is global food security. Water security is global energy security. Water security is catalyst for nations' peace and security. And water security is a center for sustainable development across all spheres of development. It is in that context that I highly hope that the outcomes and the resolutions from 7th India Water Week will make a significant contribution to the United Nations Water Conference in March 2023 in New York. Dear guests of honor and colleagues, after being global, let me end my speech by focusing the United Republic of Tanzania. The Tanzania water sector enjoys partnership with the government of India. We have good and long-term collaborations in financing, managing water resources, water supply, and sanitation. The United Republic of Tanzania, with the collaboration from India, has enhanced water supply and sanitation services with urban coverage rising from an average of 74% in 2015 to 86% in June 2022. And rural coverage from 47% in 2015 to 74% in June 2022. While the nation targets 85 for rural areas by 95 in urban areas by 2025. The United Republic of Tanzania calls upon the international community development partners, and it is especially for the government of India to join hands in financing for the water sector in order to realize the national targets in 3 years' time. Dear guests of honor and colleagues, the United Republic of Tanzania calls upon the international community to give significant importance in investing in water sector in Africa. In a special way, the United Republic of Tanzania supports the global agenda on water and call upon all countries to raise the profile of water agenda in regional economic blocks and United Nations gatherings. One message that is clear from the midterm review of United Nations Water Decade is that the budget set for the water sector especially in Africa, and the other parts of the world is not equal to the problem of water and sanitation across the countries. Therefore, one lesson learned in the area for improvement during the second half of water decade is to increase the budget for water sector and invest the water sector. We need to face this challenge and act now. Dear guests of honor and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I once again thank for the government of India for inviting United Republic of Tanzania to the remarkable 2022 India Water Week. Let all of us, all the time and everywhere, amplify and raise the profile of global water agenda, as it is a matter of fact that water is a enable of world sustainable development. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, madam. I now invite Dr. Asit K. Bishwas, visiting distinguished professor, University of Glasgow, to deliver the keynote address on the main theme, Water Security for Sustainable Development with Equity.
Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, and my many friends from both India and abroad. Let me take the 20 minutes I have to share with you what I see as India's water problem, and what is more important, what are the solutions. You see, when I started in my career in India, I was one of the first graduates of IIT Kharagpur, and I also did my master's from there at the same time. And IIT, those days were not very well known, and after 6 months of not getting a job, I was forced to migrate and go elsewhere to get a job. Now, after 50 or 60 years of work, I'm coming to India literally every year, at least once. This year I've been here. This is my second visit. I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart my views on India's water management and what are the solutions. Perhaps you'll agree with me with 80% of the issues I raise, but that is fine. I have no problem. My father once said, son, if two people agree on anything, be sure only one of them is doing the thinking. So we are all thinking people, so there has to be some divergence of opinion in some areas. The event like India Water Week is important for one very important reason. In my view, knowledge has 4 dimensions. The first dimension is generation. Somebody has to generate knowledge. Second dimension is so much knowledge is produced now on every topic. We need synthesis. Somebody to look at all the solutions that are available, analyze them, and decide which one may be useful. For example, in India, what may be a solution for Assam, most certainly water solution for Assam, most certainly will not be the best solution for Rajasthan or Punjab. So you have to have a menu of solutions, but all the synthesis can give you that part. Third aspect of knowledge, in my mind, is dissemination. How do we disseminate knowledge? And these days with social media and so much fake news, good knowledge, unfortunately, sometimes get hidden. And most important is application. How do we apply the existing knowledge? Let me say quite bluntly, India can solve all its water problems now, within the next few years, at least certainly within the next 10 years, with the existing knowledge, with the existing resources available, and by experts that are in India that have the solutions. That part, I have no doubt. But will it happen? Will it happen? I doubt it very much because there are some major constraints. Let me just give you some example of problems India faces, which I do not see discussed anywhere in the forums of this type. First, the domestic water supply. Let's talk about domestic water supply. Delhi has a water problem. Mumbai has a water problem. Excuse me. Chennai has a water problem. Several chief ministers called me up saying, you are one of the world's leading experts. Can you solve our water problem? My answer is always the same. Yes, I can solve it, but you have to take some very hard political decisions, and that part is missing. Let us look at Delhi. Has Delhi enough water? Answer is yes. Are that water properly distributed? Answer is no. In fact, one of the main problems I see is there has never been a single study done by any Indian academic or any Indian from government institution ask a very simple question. How much water does an Indian need, average Indian need, to lead a healthy and productive life? You will not find a single study to give you that answer. In fact, if you look the world over, except for Singapore, nobody has done such a study. And then I asked the very simple question, how do we come to these ideas of rural people should get at least 55 liters, urban people must have 130 liters? Based on what? As you look into it, you'll see those are numbers plugged out from the ear without no science. And as a scientist, I find it difficult to accept that. And that's the first step I would suggest on the domestic water supply. We start with how much water do we need as a human being in India, as an Indian, to lead a healthy and productive life? The Singapore study I mentioned is the only study of that nature available anywhere in the world. From 1965, for 10 years, they studied how much water an average Singaporean needs so that they have a healthy and productive life. And they found out that Singaporean studies clearly stipulated that once you reach the 75 liters per capita per day, your hospitalization, your medical bills, your disease incidents, beyond that number doesn't make any difference. And that was the conclusion, that to live a healthy and productive life, you need 75 liters. So the first thing I would suggest to my Indian colleagues and the Indian people who are responsible for drawing up the norms, please visit the very first fundamental thing where you were saying we'll provide the rural people 55 liters. I'm afraid 55 liters is not the right one. It's a good progress, but we have to think even for the rural people or the urban people, 75 liters per capita per day. So that is the first part I would like to suggest we look at to see how the domestic part can be done. Does an average, I don't know what is the average per capita use of a Delhi, I have no idea, but is there any need for anyone living in Delhi or Mumbai to use more than 100 liters per capita per day? I'm now seeing, if you look at Mediterranean region, where the temperature is very similar to like Delhi. I lived in Saragossa for 6 years. Average summer temperature in August at 6:30 p.m. is about 40 to 41 degrees Celsius. How come a Saragossan lives with less than 100 liters per capita per day and the people in Delhi cannot live? So we have to start with some fundamental question asking about our assumptions we are making about this. Now, the second issue I said was knowledge, synthesis, and dissemination. Now, if I ask you which water utility has the best, some of the best performance indicators, London, Paris, Los Angeles, or Phnom Penh, which of these four has the best performance indicator? I have to tell you, the best performance indicator comes from Phnom Penh. Phnom Penh's performance indicator is better than London's, better than Paris, better than Los Angeles by a mile. And yet, here is a utility in 1993 was bankrupt. You are a lucky household if you got 15 minutes of water of very indifferent quality. How did Phnom Penh manage to be such a successful water utility, and why people from India go to Singapore? Because Singapore is a remarkable place. It's the only country I know where the politicians are headhunted. The MPs are headhunted. We're not going to get the similar situation anywhere. But nobody goes from India to see Phnom Penh, how they have done. And what we're trying to do now, trying to bring out some of the most successful case studies from Singapore, from the developing world, where they have done remarkable job and which we do not know. I have with me what we call the Phnom Penh water story. How a failed water utility without any much help or expertise, put it up by bootstrap, when is a profitable public utility, provides 24/7 water, which can be drunk straight from the tap without anything. So we have an analysis of that if after, and the book has, English version is available, but the Hindi version was published only yesterday, and I have some copies. Any of you wanted, please come after the meeting. I'll be happy to give you copies of that book. Now, the question I say is, if Phnom Penh, with very little money, very little expertise, can do it, why cannot Delhi and Chennai? I'll tell you one simple solution. If Chennai does or India does, 60% of that, the city's problem will be solved. At least 60% will be solved if they make one institutional change. And that is, if you look at the chief executive of Delhi Jal Board, or the Bangalore or Chennai or Mumbai, the average stay of a Delhi CEO of Jal Board is 118 months. The average stay of the CEO of Bangalore is 13 months. They are IS officers, extremely bright, and I have great respect for them. But no human being can take a new department, a completely new area, find out the answers, develop a plan, start implementing the plan in 13 months or 18 months. It is simply not possible. The last audited report of Delhi Jal Board is six years old. We cannot proceed like that. So if India simply does one very simple thing, choose the headhunt the chief executive of Delhi Jal Board or Mumbai or Chennai, give the chief CEO first a 3-year term with clear performance indicators that this has to be done the first year, second year, evaluate that, and if they perform the first 3 years, renew it maximum of 1 term for 6 years. Another term of 3 years, 6 years, you will see the problems, much of Delhi's or Chennai's problems will be solved. So that is one institutional item I never seen discussed anywhere. Now let me just quickly go through the problems, and solutions are many and available. We talked of circularity in the plenary session briefly. Do you know which city in the world has successfully used treated domestic wastewater as a direct input to the to the potable water supply for the last 50 years and hasn't had a single problem. You'll be surprised to hear this city is from Africa. This city is ahead of the game by any of the Western world by 50 years, and this is from Windhoek in Namibia. So it's not the question that we can do the things developing well in developing countries well, but we have to look for solutions where they are more similar to the other developing countries and could be applied for developing country conditions. So if you are talking of circularity, please see what Windhoek has done for the 50 years and how it has solved its water problem in a very desert area. But I assure you, not a single person here will know anything about Windhoek, because all over the world, we look at what's happening in California, what's happening in Australia, but we don't look at the developing world. Yesterday, I had my colleagues, Professor Cecilia and Tortajada, had some very good discussions with the secretaries, Rupa Mishra, Joint Secretary, and I was surprised to hear the city of Surat has been treating its wastewater, primary, secondary, tertiary treatment of wastewater, and then selling that treated wastewater to industry, and it's a very profitable model. What are the enabling conditions what makes Surat do it, and why has not Delhi managed to do that? We need not just, when you look for knowledge generation, we need to study why Surat has become successful. One of the few, probably the few cities in India has successful in circularity, but other have not managed to do so. The other aspect I'd like to very quickly touch on, a major problem we are facing is water quality. I do not know a single family, my family is, whatever family left India, they don't drink water straight from the tap. I was told we are providing clean water from the tap and people can drink it. Well, I don't know which country we're living in, but I don't know a single person, either in Delhi or any other part of India, who drinks straight from the tap. They don't have trust in water. They all use reverse osmosis. Most of them use reverse osmosis. Now, how good is reverse osmosis? One of the problem of RO is very important problem is amount of water that passes through reverse osmosis in a domestic setting is probably only 20%. Large scale RO, for every liter of water produced by reverse osmosis, 1.5 liters of brine has to be thrown out. So there's a tremendous losses. And what is also important, I could not find a single study in India which shows what is the quality of water after reverse osmosis. People assuming you have a membrane, you have RO, whatever comes out is good. I submit to you, if you look at it with a mass-produced membranes at a such cost, it's not so. So India has many challenges, but I'd like to submit that challenges we can overcome. One thing I'm heartened, for the first time in 50 years, at least for the last 2 or 3 years, I see that the political will is to do something is there, which was not there earlier. Earlier, in all of the Indian states, main problem was when there was a drought, when there was a flood, water was the top of the agenda. The day the flood is over, water disappeared from the political agenda till the next drought. And I submit to you that water management needs a decades of planning, operation, management, and good governance, without which we cannot succeed. India has the expertise, India has the funds, and there is no reason, absolutely no reason, why the country cannot solve its water problem within the next 10 to 15 years. What can it do it? It will depend if the political will is sustained or not. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give me to speak.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vishwas. aspects of water security and their impacts, may I now request Shri A.D. Mohile, former chairman, CWC, to kindly give his presentation on the sub-theme. Thank you. Shri A.D. Mohile.
Honorable Minister and all the dignitaries who are perhaps running a little short of time. So I will start with the presentations. Uh, the paper deals with water security evolution, the expanding scope of water development, and how security can be classified and how water supply impacts the nation, a region, or the globe. How under severely stressed strategic security conditions, water security may be destabilized. The paper is not focused on any aerial unit. It is not meant for India alone, but there is an automatically, since my experience in India is larger, it will. All oh, okay. The water development and management strategies all over the world have changed, and these are changes in India. The changes are of two types. The aerial expansion about the area of concern when you are dealing, and the changing emphasis about the objectives of development. Let's quickly see these. Next slide, please. This paper, a preferred definition of water security, we'll see. Uh, Something wrong. Can you operate from there? Next slide. The next.
देखो भाई स्लाइड कौन मैनेज कर रहा है वहां से एक बार
Initially, the development was looked upon as a single project. Its investigation, planning, approval, etc. Around 1960, the concept of integrated basin-wise planning took roots. While this IRBM concept gained acceptance, around 1990 it had to be expanded to integrated water resource management, IWRM, which enables a look beyond the basin. Around 2000, the concerns about national and global security in regard to food, etc., gained importance, and thus water management impacts at local, national, regional, global scale gained more attention. Next slide. Now, expanding the scope from project to basin involved both interprovincial or interstate in Indian context problems. This major problem is often reduces the effective use of IRBM concept even today, because basin can involve many political units. The difficulty is faced prominently while using IWRM concept, where you look even beyond the basin, so the area of concern becomes much larger. When the emphasis changes from water development and management to water security, which is the latest, this thing, which impacts through food, energy, health, and economic security. The national security impacts become paramount. This expands the area of concern to all the nations involved, the whole region, and also the globe. Next, initially the emphasis was regional economic efficiency or benefit cost analysis of a project. When you go beyond to master planning the whole basin or master planning area beyond the basin, then uh, environmental and social impacts have to be emphasized. The socio political and river ecological aspects also received the emphasis. And in the earlier version of planning, project planning, government was considered as the main stakeholder. And of course, there are stakeholders like farmers, electricity user. But all that it was thought that the all powerful and all concerned government will deal with this problem. When you go to the newer concept, the all the group of stakeholders, their different objectives, their different preferences need to be considered. Next, there are many definitions of water security, which is a recent word which has come into practice. There are short definitions, long definitions, definitions which do not go into water related risk and which go into it. But preferred definition for many and for me also is the UN water definition. Water security is the capacity of a population, etc. That what is written, you have read it already. Next, there are quantity related aspects. Is there sufficient water for each person's and various activities? Quality related is water sufficient. Ecology related, will the water situation lead to serious adverse changes, etc. Ecology related, another, will the ecosystem get adversely affected, and will the water security, okay, social and cultural aspects, will the water situation require the population to make large changes in their social and cultural use or non-use related to water? Next, is the water of good quality? Next, different aspects. Uh, uh, is the water okay? Next, water security affects food security. The connection is direct and simple. Most of the food grains, oil seeds, fiber crops also depend upon irrigation or rainwater, so it consumes water. Water security affects energy security. There are three important connections. Water produces power, which is renewable and thus a better form of energy. But lifting of surface water and or groundwater for irrigation requires use of energy. In India, if you see, both these quantities are somewhat balanced. This energy often is derived from fossil fuels, including petroleum. Again, if water is used for biofuel production by growing biofuel crops, then you use water for energy security, and you also use arable land, which can be a very limited resource. For example, in India, around 150, 140 million hectares is our arable land resources. And in order to conserve forest, etc., we have kept that figure more or less this constant for years together. Can you afford giving part of it for biofuel crops, excluding, of course, sugarcane, where it is a byproduct and doesn't consume separate water or land? Uh, Water security affects the health of the people. because water in adequate quantity and good quality is essential for sanitation, essential for health. And water, of course, affects economic development. That is. Next slide. The nexus in all this is important for national security. The national security of any nations affects the whole region and its strategic security. The national and regional security concerns are very complex. They are interrelated through economic treaties, economic zones like the European Union, Asian, etc., and also through strategic treaties amongst nations. Thus, water security of any nation or basin cannot be used in an isolated manner and has the potential to affect global peace and security. Next slide. Now, how to these water security impacts can be mitigated. Mitigative measures for maintaining water security often involves uh, actual water transfer. It also involves physical water transfer sometimes, like between Canada and US. The water security related issues of one nation may adversely affect other nation. Food security aspects related to inadequate water are often mitigated by large-scale international food trade. This is often viewed as trade in virtual water. Any global events affecting security of a nation or a group of nations can affect international food trade. We are very recent examples, need not elaborate. Any large destabilization of global security is likely to affect international. For large countries experiencing stressed food security, the possibility of using food as a weapon against that nation is a distinct possibility. Considering this, the Indian policies have always preferred food security in general terms as a national policy without large scale reliance on international food trade. We rely only on the margin on international. Through this path, water security is of strategic national importance. Next. Tortajola is CATL. Dr. Vishwas is already here. Studied the water and water-related regional aspects of India, particularly in regard to the US foreign policy implications. They found an absence of logical long-term framework for water governance in India and deficiency in water dispute resolution and implementation of a related decision. However, hesitancy in governmental hard water-related decisions, they concluded that US has a limited role to play in this situation. Next, 2015 report of GWP, Securing Water Sustaining Growth, modeled and analyzed water situation globally. Their findings in brief are water security risks most severe in India and Pakistan, water uncertainty risk, which will also include climate change, most severe in Africa, South Asia, and Central Asia. Flood and coastal damage, sea level rise risk, coastal Asia, East and Southeast Asia. Water supply and sanitation inadequacies are severe in sub-Saharan and Northern Africa. However, large risks were found in China, India, Pakistan, and Vietnam. Next. There is a global water security report by US intelligence agency available um, on the internet. There may be many such reports which countries would not publish. Uh, they studied the situation in some strategically important basins like Nile, Tigris, Euphrates, Mekong, Jordan, Indus, Brahmaputra, Amudarya. All these are basins where troubles can start because of water security. Interestingly, these appear strategic for India, but when you do similar study for India, Ganga, Meghna, Irrawaddy may have to be added. Their findings as published here, in next 10 years, water inadequacies will be destabilizing factor in some countries. Groundwater situation may affect food production and food security. After 10 years, nations will exert leverage on neighbors to preserve their waters, and water can be used as a weapon by the terrorists. Next. The US intelligence continued. International food trade may be the best solution as per them. US expertise on sound policy making and satellite based information will be much in demand. And US will have larger share in international food trade if countries rely on such trade more than their mutual water related agreements. Of course, I told you Bishwa's study perhaps does not favor this. Uh, Next, my brief concluding remarks are water security is a new addition to the strategies for water development and management in the evolutionary process of increasing the area of concern and changing objectives. It's one more step. We don't know after 20 years another step may come. However, in the evolving world order, with strong economic and strategic groups formed all over a multipolar world, the water security and related national, regional, and global securities represent a real life concern. It should not be treated as a new fad. It's a requires serious thinking. In the author's views, water security risk related water security related risk crawl into the area of strategic risk only when disputes are not solved. The resolution process within a nation requires updation and improvement. For international disputes, bilateral treaties, and also larger use of the framework of UN conventions of non-navigable rivers, etc., provide a useful possibility. Individuals, institutes, and governments need to conduct serious reviews of water-related security concerns after scientific analysis, start debate, and provide material to the decision maker. Another aspect is the likely purposeful destabilization of water security through overt and covert operations. Such strategic security is under When strategic security is under severe stress, implementing an action plan for securing water security to large cities with some compromised water source is suggested. I will just elaborate a little on this. When the security advantage the situation really goes bad, somebody will try to destabilize purposely the water security. This can be done either by overt means and covert means. If it is done by overt means, you have got all the defense establishment to deal with it. It's a matter for defense experts. When it comes to covert, you have got other agencies who will deal with it. But there are certain possibilities which we need to consider. One of the overt possibilities is destruction of storages. Now there are war conventions or law of wars which prohibit poisoning, destructions of anything which will suddenly, the wording is that suddenly it will unleash forces which are not possible to control. Destruction of dams will come in that. And so there are four concerns which in my text I have dealt with more in. There is a text based on these slides. And there is another possible, but these conventions of war may not be followed. So we must have different plans. For example, there are reservoirs and reservoirs, but some reservoirs are large, and not only they are large, a large part of their storage is against gates, and gates are the more vulnerable parts of the reservoirs. So we must lease reservoirs where large storage is under gates, which enemy action can in overtly destroy. Covert destruction through sabotaging is also possible, but overt is more easy. And you must have plans to how to deal with the situation, what is the flood that will come, what bridges will get destroyed, and keep preparedness for that. Similarly, there are possibilities that in cities, more and more of our population is in cities now, about 50% will be in cities, and some would be large cities. Cities normally have surface water supply. Groundwater gets contaminated and so on. And surface water supply of cities can be from one source and or multiple sources. When it is from multiple sources, things are slightly better. You have a grid of pipelines, and I suggest that each city has to be studied, and redundancy in that pipeline grid is to be large redundancy is to be in, so that out of three sources the city is receiving, if any one is polluted by such acts, the area, there should be no area which is exclusively supplied only by that source. A limited supply of at least, let us say, 25 PCD, it should be possible to supply through other sources through the pipe redundancies. Where this is not possible, unused storages or unused sources may have to be kept for dealing with such situation. For example, when we visited Lyon in France, Lyon is a fairly large, important city. They have kept two or three moraine reservoirs unused, untapped, and with large water supplies plant built and kept unused except for 2 hours in a week. It will be put on trial run, stopped. And that is for in such situation, perhaps they are more worried about um, nuclear power plants misbehaving. Such situation, at least 10 days supply can be made through those unused moraine aquifers to see that the city does not starve of water. So, lastly, together we can prove the prophecies about water wars as wrong and prove water as an agent for peace if we take all these precautions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद श्री A.D. मोहिले जी. DG IMWI Dr. Mark Smith is now kindly requested to give his presentation on the sub-theme addressing the challenges of growing demands through water cooperation.
Much. Thank you so much. Have some slides, yes. Honorable Minister of Jal Shakti, Your Excellencies, Deputy Ministers from Tajikistan and Tanzania, Professor Biswas, distinguished delegates, I do feel truly honored to have been invited to speak in this plenary marking the start of India Water Week. India is a country with deep expertise historically and in the present day in relation to water management, and from which I am constantly learning. As Director General of IMI, I'm very grateful to our partners and collaborators here in India, as well as my colleagues at IMI India for that privilege. And I'm grateful too to be able to contribute my thoughts and reflections to this conference on the subject of managing water demand and the importance of cooperation in doing so. As I'll outline, I see the water system that all of us here depend on, and that all or most of us attending this conference spend our professional lives contributing to managing. I see this system as under enormous strain, both globally and in India, and that strain is growing more acute. Our challenge is therefore to build water security in the water system. Our challenge is therefore to build water security as the water system it's undergoing profound changes that themselves make water security harder. And here I use the term water security differently than the previous speaker, and more in the sense of how our capacity to manage water risks in terms of quantity and quality. To confront this challenge, we certainly have technical approaches and innovation, including vital advances that I'll touch upon in terms of technologies for acquiring and applying water data and information. But ultimately, the stresses on the water system mean, I think, that we have to challenge the prevailing paradigm for water management to make it more suited to meeting the demands of managing change in complex systems, in an increasingly complex water system. The statistics on the screen tell a familiar story in many respects. It's not news that demands on water resources are growing. Global water demand has grown by a factor of 6 in the last century. Withdrawals for irrigation are projected, at least some projections, and I'll spend a little more time on this toward the end of my presentation. Water withdrawals for irrigation are projected to increase by 60% by 2050. Water use in energy systems projected to increase by 85% in the same period. And water withdrawals for industry projected to rise by 250% in Asia and 800% in Africa by 2050. At the same time, competition for water is getting tighter and availability is declining because of pollution, with more than half of people living with water scarcity for more than 1 month per year, also by 2050. And numbers of people exposed to flood risks rising to 1.6 billion by 2050. So it's fair to say that the world and its water systems are truly on track to being thirstier and riskier. And this story, of course, echoes here in this region. The statistics bear out the same set of issues here in this region. But on top of these strains in the water system comes climate change. The latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, published earlier this year, and particularly the water chapter of this report, for which my IMI colleague, Dr. Aditi Mukherjee, who is here today, was one of the lead authors. This report tells us that climate change is making water security harder to achieve. It showed that the hydrological cycle is intensifying because of climate change, so there's more energy in the system driving more extremes, more frequent and severe droughts and floods, extreme precipitation, shifting tropical monsoons, changing river flows, all things that we see in the scientific data, but also things we see increasingly in headlines around the world. The IPCC concluded that climate change is already reducing the water security of many millions of people, with projected risks, for example, to agriculture, such a large user of water, and food security, therefore, because of reduced production, water scarcity, increased flood losses, and so on, as you see in the blue box on the screen. As these risks unfold, the need for adaptation to climate change grows. And in the case of agriculture, that leads to increasing calls to manage climate risks, to reduce climate risks using more irrigation. That, of course, is not as simple as it sounds. And we will have to make sure that irrigation, as used as a tool for adaptation, is itself robust to climate change. But as the IPCC report also makes clear, there's another complication with very important implications. And I have to say, probably in the last years, this is the most, you could say, hair-raising thing that I've learned, I think, about the future of water resources. So the report concluded that water risks rise with every increment of warming. And then the key point, the effectiveness of adaptation options for reducing water risks falls beyond 2 degrees of warming. And what that means is that there's a danger that warming outpaces our capacity to adapt. And therefore, there's a finite window of time for adaptation, for achieving the contributions that people, of course, the most vulnerable people, need from adaptation measures. And that means that not only are the strains on water systems growing more acute as demand grows and as the climate changes, but also that we should feel real urgency, a real sense of urgency to make the changes needed to build water security for the future that is coming. So what are some of the changes that we need to make? I'll use agricultural water management as an example. In rain-fed agriculture, we need more soil and water conservation, or more effective soil and water conservation, rainwater storage of rainwater to raise water productivity, to get more production from the water that we have. For irrigated agriculture, it's the case that many schemes fall well short of their expected performance, and therefore, as we look to the future, it's absolutely critical that we raise the system performance to get more from the capacity, from the irrigation capacities that we already have. And we also need to look towards enabling irrigation transitions. Here I mean, for example, through farmer-led irrigation or transition to solar-powered irrigation, and making applications of technologies and irrigation services accessible also to small-scale farmers. Through support for enabling and inclusive innovation, policy, financing, and value chains and sustainability. But also, and I'll come back to this toward the end of my presentation, also the possibility of having to manage retreat from areas where future water risks are too high to sustain irrigation, and then equally, of course, enabling expansion into areas where irrigation potential is unmet and future water supply is robust. We will have to do more with the water we have, or indeed with less water. So in the case of agriculture, this means overcoming the vexed issue of achieving real water savings in irrigation, where the key is, though it's not at all a simple matter, let's not pretend, it's not at all a simple matter, the key is integrating and aligning management for efficiency and water productivity across scales, which means moving from improving seed selection and agronomic practices at field scale through to soil and water conservation, through to raising irrigation system performance, as I touched upon, and combining that as we move it to the larger scales with governance to optimize allocation across sectors and integrate water storage and use incentives at catchment and basin scale to national level. So not at all simple, but necessary. There are also real gains to be made in innovation for water in the circular economy to reduce vulnerability to scarcity and get more from less. For example, the reuse of wastewater in agriculture fits here. Next is what I like to think of as joint problem solving in the water, energy, food ecosystem nexus. The purpose here, of course, is to integrate decision making across sectors and across multiple objectives, which can be competing objectives. And the recently published data that you see on the right side of the graph show that irrigation modernization, in this case transitioning from furrow to sprinkler and drip irrigation, that does that job of integrating water, energy, and food system performance objectives, achieves enhanced benefits across crop production, energy productivity, and water use efficiency in comparison to managing within silos. So the point here is that integrated nexus management, therefore, is an effective means for strengthening our sustainability objectives. Innovation, and a prime example of this is innovation for sustainable expansion of solar irrigation here in India to expand access to renewable energy and reduce reliance on diesel-powered pumping. A prime example of working with the nexus. At IMI, we continue to support innovation and scaling of solar irrigation in India, for example, through the Solar Irrigation for Agricultural Resilience Project and the IMI Tata Water Policy Research Program, and our partnerships with ICAR and the GIZ India, for example. At larger basin scales, the CGIR, of which my institute IMI is a part, the CGIR earlier this year launched an initiative called Nexus Gains to strengthen the application of Nexus approaches to the development, the sustainable development of food, land, and water systems. And we're very pleased that the Ganga is one of the 5 focal basins worldwide for that program. So, of course, alongside these types of innovation is digital innovation, which is driving rapid changes in the tools available to generate critical data and information that we need for decision making in water. The digital revolution for water comes at a very critical time because of climate change. Because climate change means that the past is no longer a reliable guide to future water, to future planning for water. And this means that real-time monitoring of water resources and regular updating to support assessment of how water risks are changing is going to be all the more crucial. It's all the more crucial now. So 2 examples of this are on the screen, are the South Asia Drought Monitoring System led by IMI and the application also of satellite-based assessments of flooding to agricultural insurance for smallholder farmers. Okay, so those are contributions that innovation and information can make to the challenge of building water security for the future. But what of the question then of cooperation and the need that I outlined at the start to challenge the prevailing paradigm, the prevailing international paradigm for water management? I think that the ratcheting up of the complexity of water system as demand grows and as climate change takes hold means that it is more important than ever to challenge integrated water resource management. And to be clear, I don't mean replace it, as that would amount to calling to upend water policy across many countries, but rather to change IWRM so that it helps us with the task of catalyzing and managing change in water systems. And so rethink IWRM and reorient it to the needs of the future. On the left of the screen are the original 4 pillars of IWRM from the 1990s. These pillars are criticized often as being too top-down, too normative, too technocratic, which stands in sharp contrast to the work on adaptive governance, for which Elinor Ostrom won a Nobel Prize, suggesting we should pay attention to it, worthy of a Nobel Prize, and which showed that successfully managing complex adaptive systems for common pool resources, such as water, works best when institutions are decentralized, there is dialogue and deliberation, and people are empowered for decision-making and collective action. Or as Bruce Langford, 2 researchers, Bruce Langford and Nick Hepworth, wrote in 2010 that IWRM too often operates as if it was taking place in the quiet and exclusive enclave of a cathedral, when it should be a noisy and raucous bazaar full of vigorous bargaining and debate. So based on this mismatch of theory and real needs, Torkel Jons Clausen and myself, we wrote a report for the World Water Council in 2018 and proposed updating the pillars of IWRM to add 2 more. So 5th, remember there were 4 before, so 5th would be strategies for catalyzing and managing change at all levels, and 6th, operating mechanisms that bridge strategy setting to practical problem solving. The result would then be, as you see in the blue box, the result would then be an IWRM that's characterized as having policies and laws that set the rules of the game, institutions that work across scales, enabling negotiation and the strengthening of inclusion and gender equality, data that supports decision-making, financing that targets the right problems, and crucially, learning, negotiation, and adaptive management are then key tools for managing complex systems change. And there's practical problem solving that takes place under a guiding strategy. With this framework, that prevailing paradigm for IWRM would transition, this is what we would advocate, would transition from IWRM as a somewhat rigid, process-driven approach to be an umbrella for flexible, adaptive, and cooperative management of problem solving for systems change. So IWRM is then a high-level framework, and underneath are practical models to bring together the key actors to solve problems, bring together the key actors that are pertinent to a problem to come together to solve problems that they share. in, for example, as you see on the screen, the water, energy, food nexus in corporate water stewardship, integrated flood management, etc. So to summarize, to build water security in the context of growing demand, rapidly changing risks, and a new urgency because of climate change, we need to apply innovation and deploy new information resources and rethink the paradigm for water management to focus on cooperative approaches to change in increasingly complex water systems. But before I finish, I want to ask, how much ambition is enough? So in that context of a water systems that's under more acute strain, how much ambition is enough? So here's a challenge on the screen for us to think about. How do we manage for the possibilities of these two radically different futures? This refers to irrigation. So if irrigation is so important for future food security, what do we know about the future of irrigation? Well, it seems not that much. In fact, there are two very contradictory storylines about the future a future of irrigation that you can read about in the literature. So on the one hand, on the left side, is that irrigation water requirements are projected to increase by 2 to 3-fold by the end of the century. Well, on the other side, on the other hand, on the right-hand side, is modeling led by the Potsdam Climate Institute, and they made an assessment of what would it take to feed a world of 10 billion people within planetary boundaries. And their assessment was that this would require widespread reallocation of cropland and irrigation away from where it will be unsustainable, unreliable, and risky in future. And that the net result of doing that was actually, in their assessment, was a decrease in irrigation water use of 7% globally, so going down. But with changes in practices and efficiencies and lower risks, achieving the 50% increase in food production that would be needed. So a challenge for us is how do we deal with these seeming contributions? How will we use the tools available to us, the strategies for managing complex systems, cooperatively and adaptively, to navigate between possible futures, which are either a bonanza of irrigation with a tripling of water use, or a new water parsimony in agriculture in which water is given back. Water is given back to relieve water risks to other sectors and to nature for nature-based solutions and resilience. So my last slide. At IMI, we, together with the World Youth Parliament for Water and a growing group of over 60 partners across 8 regions, are working to convene a dialogue to ask these kinds of hard questions about the future and how we make sure that our ambitions for water management will meet the severity of the challenges that the future will bring. We've launched the Transformative Futures for Water Security initiative to bring together the policy, business, development, and science communities alongside youth to identify 5 to 6 what we call high ambition missions for science-based action on water security, as well as form mission-driven alliances or coalitions to then take those missions into the UN 2023 Water Conference and its water action agenda that the Deputy Minister from Tajikistan introduced in his remarks, and take those to that conference, which takes place next March, to promote and catalyze action on water security at the scale and with the urgency that our water systems now need. And we invite you all to join that dialogue as we then move toward that UN 2023 Water Conference. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. May I now request Honorable Minister of Jal Shakti, Shri Bhairu Singh Shekhawat ji, to kindly give the closing remarks, please. Cordless on कर दीजिए.
Yeah, thank you very much. As Mark was mentioning, that how much ambition is enough. I must say how much delay we can afford for the lunch. So as we are already late for the lunch, and I must not take much of time in concluding these other remarks, I must thank you, both the ministers from Tanzania and Tajikistan, for their valuable remarks and the words of appreciation what they have expressed. I also thank all the panelists who shared their knowledge and wisdom and vision in the water sector, especially Dr. Asit Vishwasji and A.D. Moileji. Both of them, they have given whole of their life in the water sector. And with the vast knowledge they have accrued throughout their life working in this sector, they have tried to express and put the nectar of their knowledge in such a few, it's such a small time of 20 minutes and with a few words. I must express my heartfelt gratitude to them, especially my gratitude to Mark, that the institute, what he is representative, IWMI, is a think tank which is known globally in the water sector. He has expressed, he has come forward with the challenges, he envisages the impacts of the climate change which are going to happen and which we are facing in that the moment in the day-to-day life, and how we can go forward for the sustainable future and for the sustainable development in life. Violence have given a new dimension. It is very relevant in the present times when the war is going on in Europe. So everything or anything can be weaponized, as he has expressed a concern that the gates of the reservoirs also can be weaponized. So this is also a new thought and point of a new thinking and vision for all of us. I must express all my thanks and gratitudes to all the panelists and the people present here, and I request all of you for join us for the lunch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. There is important information. After 1 hour, maybe around 3:30, the inauguration of the exhibition will be done by the Honorable Minister. So we have to reach in the exhibition hall for the inauguration. And after that, after half an hour, we all will gather for the critical sessions in the hall number ABCD. So see you at 3:15. So much enjoy the lunch. All of you, namaskar, Jai Hind.